In a world that celebrates noise, constant movement, and the never-ending stream of words, silence is often mistaken for absence. Many assume that when someone chooses silence, it is a lack of response, a lack of courage, or even a lack of power. Yet the reality is quite the opposite. Silence is not the void of strength, it is the purest manifestation of it. It is not weakness, but the cultivation of a discipline so profound that most never reach it. Silence is a force that can calm storms within the mind, reshape the energy of conflict, and allow clarity to rise from the depths of confusion. Strength has always been misunderstood. For some, it means overpowering, being louder than others, or asserting dominance. But real strength is not measured by how forcefully one speaks, but by how skillfully one restrains. The loud voice may seem powerful in the moment, but it quickly fades into the background noise of the world. The silent presence, however, lingers. It has a weight that cannot be ignored. Silence is the mountain standing still while the winds howl, unshaken and immovable. It carries an authority without ever needing to raise its voice. Silence requires control. To speak out of impulse is easy. It requires no mastery, no patience, no discipline. Words can be flung recklessly, leaving wounds that linger long after the sound disappears. Silence, however, demands awareness. It is the act of holding one's tongue when anger tempts release, of observing thoughts without rushing to let them spill into the air. In that stillness, power is preserved. To remain silent when every part of you wants to react is to hold the sword but not swing it. That is mastery, that is strength. Many people fear silence because it feels empty. They are uncomfortable with the lack of noise, as if silence exposes them to truths they would rather not face. But within silence lies presence. It is in silence that one hears the whisper of intuition, the subtle movements of the heart, the deeper rhythm of life that cannot be perceived when drowned in endless chatter. Silence is a teacher, showing that wisdom does not come from speaking more, but from listening deeper. Those who know silence can hear what is unspoken, see what is hidden, and sense what is beyond words. In relationships, silence is often taken as indifference. Yet when used consciously, it is the highest form of communication. To be silent is not to withdraw, but to allow space for understanding. It is the refusal to let ego dominate, the choice not to escalate what could become destructive. It is the strength to say, I do not need to prove my point with words, because truth does not need my defense. When two people can sit in silence together without discomfort, there is connection at its purest. In the practice of martial arts and meditation, silence is indispensable. A warrior who acts without silence inside will be reckless. A mind that is constantly loud with thought cannot perceive the opponent clearly. Silence brings focus. It sharpens awareness. It allows one to move with precision instead of chaos. A monk who cultivates silence learns that strength is not always expressed in action, but in restraint. A fighter who learns silence discovers that the greatest battles are won not with force, but with patience. The power of silence extends beyond personal discipline into transformation. When silence is chosen in moments of conflict, it dissolves escalation. When silence is present in times of stress, it steadies the heart. When silence is practiced in the midst of confusion, it brings clarity. It does not mean ignoring, nor does it mean suppression. It means rising above the immediate pull of reaction, and in doing so, creating space for wisdom to emerge. Silence does not hide weakness, it reveals the depth of inner stability. One of the greatest strengths lies in the ability to not be controlled by the need to respond. The world pressures individuals to always have an answer, to always voice an opinion, to always react. Yet silence defies this pressure. It is the quiet refusal to be manipulated by external noise. It is a form of sovereignty, a reclaiming of inner territory. In silence, you are not moved by provocation, not driven by impulse, not enslaved by the constant demands of the world. You stand in your own presence undisturbed. Silence is not passivity. It is not surrender. It is preparation. Like the stillness before storm, silence holds immense energy within it. It is the pause that allows redirection, the calm before action, the gathering of power before release. Those who understand silence know that it is not the absence of response, but the most deliberate form of response. It communicates certainty without needing words, presence without performance, and strength without aggression. Silence is a mirror. When cultivated, it reflects the state of one's mind with honesty. In silence, the restless mind reveals its patterns. In silence, emotions surface without disguise. To sit with silence is to face oneself, and that is why many avoid it. But those who embrace it discover that silence polishes the mind like water polishes a stone. It wears down the unnecessary, leaving behind clarity, resilience, and inner strength. To live with silence as strength is to move differently through the world. Instead of reacting to every noise, you respond only when necessary. Instead of exhausting energy through needless words, you conserve it for what truly matters. Instead of seeking validation through speech, you embody certainty through presence. And in doing so, you show that silence is not the absence of voice, but the fullness of power unspoken. In the modern world, expression is celebrated. To speak loudly, to share constantly, to showcase opinions and emotions without pause is often regarded as strength. The louder the voice, the greater the attention it receives. But in the silence between words, there is something deeper, something often overlooked. Energy that is not wasted in constant expression begins to gather within. It thickens, it strengthens, it consolidates into a force that is felt rather than spoken. Expression can entertain, but energy that is preserved and directed can transform. When every thought, every reaction, every feeling is immediately expressed, what remains within? It is like drawing water from a well without ever allowing it to refill. At first, the water flows freely, but soon it becomes shallow, then muddy, then empty. In the same way, the person who expresses without pause may appear vibrant, but their depth is soon revealed as fragile. True power is not in how quickly one can speak, but in how patiently one can withhold, observe, and cultivate the inner reservoir. Consider the Shaolin monks who train in silence for hours, sometimes days. Their bodies move with precision, yet words are absent. It is not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that spoken expression disperses energy outward, while silence gathers it inward. The world is saturated with voices, opinions, and noise, but when you encounter someone who has preserved their energy rather than spilling it into every passing conversation, you feel the difference. Their presence itself becomes a language. Their silence is not emptiness, it is density. Energy over expression is not suppression. It does not mean to bury feelings, to choke thoughts, or to deny the voice. It means to choose carefully when to release, because release is not free. It costs energy. If every small irritation, every trivial disagreement, every fleeting desire is expressed, then the reservoir is drained before it can ever be channeled into something meaningful. Energy withheld is energy available. And when it is finally directed, it carries a weight that scattered expression never could. Think of the archer. If the bow is released too early, the arrow falls weakly to the ground. The strength lies not in the release, but in the drawing back, in the tension, in the patience to wait for the right moment. Energy functions in the same way. To hold it, to contain it, to concentrate it is to prepare for a release that has precision and force. To express without containment is to shoot without aim. The cultivation of this principle requires discipline. In daily life, countless opportunities to express arise. Moments when ego wants to speak, moments when impatience wants to react, moments when anger demands release. Most people pour energy into those expressions, feeling temporary relief, but weakening themselves in the process. The practice of energy over expression is to notice these impulses and to resist scattering energy unnecessarily. By holding it within, the energy does not vanish. It transforms into clarity, resilience, and strength of presence. A person who speaks less often but with depth carries more impact than one who constantly floods the air with words. Why? Because their words are backed by conserved energy. When the reservoir is full, expression becomes charged, each word weighted with meaning, each gesture amplified with quiet power. It is not volume that makes expression powerful, it is the energy behind it. And energy is preserved only through restraint, patience, and intention. When the storm of expression settles, silence reveals itself. In silence, energy rearranges. It flows into the body, strengthening the posture. It flows into the mind, sharpening perception. It flows into the heart, deepening awareness. Those who have trained themselves to favor energy over expression discover that their very presence begins to communicate more than words ever could. Without speaking, they influence. Without reacting, they direct. Without shouting, they are heard. The world often equates freedom with expression. Say whatever you feel. People are told, but there is another kind of freedom, the freedom to not express, the freedom to remain still when provoked, the freedom to listen when tempted to speak. This freedom is more demanding, but also more empowering. It frees one from the compulsion of ego, from the endless draining of energy into places where it bears no fruit. Energy that is contained becomes transformation. It seeps into movements, making them deliberate. It seeps into breath, making it steady. It seeps into thought, making it focused. Over time, the person who chooses energy over expression builds an inner fortress. It is not built of walls, but of strength that radiates quietly. And when expression does arise, it is not empty noise, it is a deliberate act shaped by discipline and charged with vitality. Expression is easy, but energy is rare. Most people spend their lives scattering it, unaware of how much power is slipping away in constant reactions. But to cultivate the art of energy over expression is to step into a different rhythm of life. It is to speak less, but mean more. To act less often, but with greater effect. To release less frequently, but with a precision that shifts the direction of things. When energy is valued above expression, life changes. One becomes less concerned with being seen and more attuned to seeing. Less concerned with being heard and more capable of hearing. Less concerned with proving oneself and more capable of knowing oneself. This shift is subtle but profound. It is the difference between the flickering light of a candle and the steady flame of a torch. One dances in the wind and disappears, the other endures and guides. Energy over expression is not an idea, it is a practice. It begins with noticing, with catching the impulse to spill energy outward and choosing instead to gather it inward. At first, it feels like withholding, but with time it reveals itself as empowerment. Energy, when not wasted, begins to build, and when it builds, it transforms the way one moves, thinks, and lives. To observe is not merely to look. Looking is passive, but observing is active. Observation is the bridge between ignorance and understanding, between repetition and refinement, between chaos and clarity. Mastery is not born in a single day, nor does it emerge from careless practice. Mastery grows in the soil of attention, and attention is sharpened by observation. When one observes deeply, even the smallest details reveal themselves. The way the breath shifts in moments of tension, the way the body reacts under pressure, the way the mind jumps from one thought to another when confronted with discomfort. Observation is the light that illuminates these patterns. Without observation, one repeats the same actions, trapped in cycles without growth. But with observation, every mistake becomes a lesson, every motion becomes a refinement, and every challenge becomes a stepping stone. Observation is not confined to the outer world. It begins within. To master anything externally, one must first master the inner domain. To observe the mind is to see how thoughts arise, how emotions move, and how desires pull the body into action. Most people are carried away by these currents unconsciously. But through observation, the currents slow down, the patterns reveal themselves, and awareness begins to guide action rather than impulse. This is the seed of mastery. When one trains the body, repetition is necessary. But repetition without observation is only mechanical. The body may grow stronger, but the movements remain clumsy. True refinement occurs when each repetition is accompanied by awareness, when the student observes not only the outcome, but the process itself. How is the weight distributed? Where does the tension hide? What happens when the breath aligns with the movement? Through this process, repetition becomes revelation and practice transforms into precision. Observation also teaches patience, for mastery is not a destination but a path. Without observation, the mind grows impatient, always seeking the next achievement. But when one observes, the journey itself becomes meaningful. Each step reveals depth, each failure reveals insight. With patient observation, progress is no longer measured by speed, but by depth of understanding. The master is not the one who performs the most impressive display. The master is the one who sees what others overlook. The ordinary person watches a movement. The master observes the energy within it. The ordinary person sees a problem. The master observes the hidden lesson inside the problem. This ability to see beyond appearances is what separates skill from mastery. Observation requires stillness. To truly observe, the mind must be quiet. A restless mind cannot notice subtlety. Just as a pond must be still to reflect the moon, the mind must be still to reflect reality. This is why silence is so valuable. In silence, one becomes more aware of the details that are usually missed, the faint sound, the slight shift of breath, the subtle intention behind an action. And it is these subtle observations that refine skill beyond measure. In the discipline of martial practice, observation transforms raw strength into controlled power. A strike delivered without observation is blind force. A strike guided by observation is precise, efficient, and effective. In the discipline of daily life, observation transforms reaction into response. Instead of being controlled by anger, fear, or desire, one observes these emotions arise, and through that observation, a choice emerges. To act consciously is mastery over self. Observation is also humility. For to observe means to admit that one does not yet fully know. The ego resists observation because it wants to believe it has already mastered. But the true path of mastery begins when one puts aside pride and chooses to see things as they are, not as one wishes them to be. The more one observes, the more one realizes how much there is to learn. And this humility itself deepens mastery. Observation connects us to the rhythm of life. The seasons change, the body ages, the breath flows in and out. These movements are constant teachers. By observing them, one learns harmony. The one who resists the flow becomes rigid. The one who observes and adapts becomes fluid. Mastery is not rigid control but dynamic balance. It is not forcing but aligning. And alignment comes from observation. In moments of struggle, when progress seems slow, observation reveals the unseen progress. The mind may want dramatic change, but observation shows that mastery often grows in small, invisible increments. The slight adjustment of posture, the quiet shift in thought, the deeper awareness of a repeated mistake. These small observations accumulate into profound transformation over time. Observation sharpens intuition. The more one observes, the more patterns become clear. Soon, the body reacts before the mind explains because observation has trained perception to anticipate. What seems like instinct in the master is actually refined observation over countless moments of attention. Intuition is not magical. It is the flowering of long, patient observation. Observation also frees energy. When one is not observing, the mind wastes energy in distraction, in judgment, in resistance. But when observing, the energy is directed fully into the present. This focus gathers strength, making even small actions powerful. The scattered mind achieves little. The observing mind transforms effort into efficiency. Mastery, then, is not a sudden event. It is the natural outcome of living with awareness. It is built in the quiet moments when one pays attention to the breath, when one notices the shift of thought, when one refines a movement by a fraction. The path to mastery is walked step by step, but each step becomes meaningful through observation. To observe is to awaken. To awaken is to see beyond the surface. And in seeing deeply, one discovers that mastery is not something far away, waiting at the end of a long path. Mastery is hidden within each moment, revealed only to the one who is willing to observe without distraction, without hurry, without blindness. Noise is not only what you hear with your ears. Noise exists in many dimensions of life, and it is one of the most persistent obstacles to clarity. Noise is the chatter of the mind, the constant inner dialogue that interrupts silence. Noise is the distraction of opinions, judgments, and expectations that come from the external world. Noise is the endless pull of desires that scatter energy in every direction. To live in a state of noise is to live fragmented, pulled away from yourself and from your own center. Detachment from noise does not mean rejecting life, nor does it mean closing yourself off from the world. It is the conscious act of no longer allowing the unimportant to dominate your inner space. It is to recognize that the background chaos exists, but it does not need to live inside of you. The human mind has a natural tendency to grasp at what is loud, what is urgent, what demands attention. This is a survival mechanism inherited from ancient times when any unusual sound could mean danger. But in the modern world, where distractions are endless and information flows without pause, this instinct works against us. Every vibration of the phone, every demand from society, every uninvited thought acts like noise that invades the mind. If you remain attached to this noise, you are controlled by it. You lose the ability to choose your response. Detachment then becomes a practice of freedom. By stepping back, by withdrawing your attention, you reclaim sovereignty over your own mind. Detachment from noise is not about creating a perfect silence around you. It is about cultivating silence within you despite what surrounds you. You can stand in the middle of a crowded street, filled with voices and movement, yet remain anchored in stillness. You can live among responsibilities and challenges, yet not allow them to drown your inner peace. The practice is internal, not external. It begins with awareness. You must first notice the noise. Many people live with constant mental chatter without even recognizing it. The first step is to become conscious of how noisy your mind and environment truly are. Once awareness is present, the next step is to redirect attention. The mind attaches to noise because it has not been trained to rest anywhere else. If you place your awareness on the breath, on the body, or on a chosen thought, you are already practicing detachment. You are choosing what to engage with instead of being dragged by the current of distractions. Slowly, you begin to realize that not all noise requires your energy. Opinions do not have to be absorbed. Thoughts do not have to be believed. Urgencies do not have to define your state. With each act of detachment, you conserve power. Detachment from noise also reveals the subtlety of life. Noise makes perception coarse. It fills the space so fully that the finer details cannot be felt. In silence, however, sensitivity awakens. The mind can perceive nuances that were hidden behind the clamor of constant thinking. This is why detachment is not an act of loss, but of gain. You gain clarity. You gain subtle perception. You gain freedom of choice. The energy that was wasted in reacting to noise becomes available for deeper living. Instead of scattering outward, the energy consolidates inward. It becomes strength. It becomes presence. There is another dimension to this practice. Noise is not only external and mental, it is also emotional. The turbulence of feelings that are constantly stirred by the environment can create an inner storm. To detach from this emotional noise does not mean to suppress or deny emotions. It means to witness them without being enslaved by them. An emotion can arise, it can flow, it can even express, but it does not need to govern the entire being. Detachment allows space between the emotion and the self, and in that space lies the possibility of mastery. The more one detaches from noise, the more one recognizes that silence is not emptiness. Silence is fullness. It is not the absence of life, but the presence of life without distortion. Noise distorts, silence reveals. Noise fragments, silence integrates. Noise agitates, silence stabilizes. In silence, you discover the foundation that is not moved by circumstances. You begin to see that true strength does not come from volume or intensity, but from depth and stillness. Yet detachment is not accomplished in a single act. It is a gradual practice, a daily training of attention. Some days the noise will feel overwhelming, and on others you will easily rest in stillness. What matters is consistency. Each time you pull back from the noise, you weaken its hold. Each time you choose silence, you strengthen your connection to inner power. With time, detachment becomes natural, like a reflex. The noise continues to exist, but it no longer enters your center. You live in the same world, yet your experience of it is transformed. Detachment from noise is ultimately a discipline of energy. Energy is your most valuable resource, and noise is its greatest thief. If you allow yourself to be consumed by distractions, by chatter, by emotional storms, then your energy is scattered. When you detach, you reclaim it. You hold your energy within, and from there it becomes creative. It becomes directed. It becomes purposeful. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean you stop caring about the world or about people or about your responsibilities. It means you stop being consumed by what does not serve your growth. It means you engage with the world from a place of clarity, not chaos. From silence, you can listen more deeply. From stillness, you can act with precision. From detachment, you can connect with what truly matters without being drowned by what does not. There is a tendency in the modern world to glorify noise. Words, opinions, arguments, endless streams of communication. People feel the need to be seen, to be heard, to prove themselves through sound. Yet in this rush to express, much is lost. The true strength of a person, the quiet discipline that builds unshakable character, often goes unnoticed because it does not shout. Silent action, the act of doing without the need for display, carries a force that reverberates far beyond any spoken claim. It is here that we discover how silence, when paired with consistent action, speaks louder than any words. Consider the tree that grows deep roots into the earth. It does not announce its growth. It does not demand attention. Season after season, it expands quietly, unseen beneath the surface. Yet it is this invisible work that makes it strong enough to weather storms. Human beings are not so different. What is cultivated in silence, discipline, practice, resilience, becomes the foundation that others later witness when strength is tested. Silent action is the root work of life. The problem arises when individuals mistake noise for impact. Talking about goals, making declarations, announcing intentions, these things can feel satisfying in the moment, but they are fragile without the weight of practice behind them. A person may say they will change, that they will commit, that they will transform. But transformation is not found in declarations. It is found in the quiet hours when no one is watching, in the discipline of rising early, in the patience of repeating the same practice daily, in the willingness to continue without applause. The noise fades, but silent action endures. Silence in action does not mean passivity. It is not inaction. Instead, it is movement without the need for recognition. A person who is silently committed to their craft does not need to prove their value through argument. Their presence speaks through the results of their labor. Their discipline becomes visible over time. Just as water wears down stone not by shouting at it, but by flowing steadily, silent persistence shapes reality. The loudest voices often fade, but the quietest actions leave lasting marks. One of the greatest misunderstandings of silence is to equate it with weakness. Many fear that if they do not constantly defend themselves, explain themselves, or justify their worth, they will be overlooked or misunderstood. But the paradox of silent action is that it generates a power that cannot be denied. The person who trains in silence eventually displays skill that cannot be ignored. The one who studies quietly develops wisdom that others seek when words are no longer enough. The one who works without needing credit becomes indispensable, for the results of their action cannot be erased. In the discipline of martial practice, the master does not need to boast about his skill. The silence of his movement speaks. A strike executed with precision does not need commentary. It communicates everything in its impact. The power of silent action is that it bypasses argument. It does not need explanation because the evidence is self-evident. This is why silent action carries a deeper authority than loud declarations. There is also a spiritual dimension to silence. When one learns to act without the need for constant affirmation, a freedom is discovered. The energy that would otherwise be wasted on convincing others is directed inward, fueling focus and persistence. In silence, the mind is less scattered. In silence, intention is clear. Every step becomes deliberate. Every action carries weight. The silence is not empty. It is full of concentration. This fullness is felt by others even if no words are spoken. Silent action is not about hiding, nor is it about withdrawal. It is about alignment. The inner world and the outer action move together without contradiction. Words can often disguise intention. One may say something and do the opposite, but silent action reveals truth. There is no disguise when results are visible. Silence protects authenticity, while action demonstrates it. In relationships, in leadership, in personal growth, silent action builds trust. Words may inspire temporarily, but actions confirm whether those words are real. The person who consistently shows up, who keeps commitments without needing constant recognition, creates an unshakable presence. Trust is not built through promises. It is built through silent repetition of deeds. Over time, this becomes the loudest voice of all. To embody silent action is to accept patience. Results do not come instantly. Just as seeds do not sprout the day they are planted, silent action requires faith in the process. The world may not notice the effort immediately, but eventually the fruits of silent labor cannot be hidden. This patience is rare in a society that craves immediate results, but it is the patience that defines true strength. The world is full of sound, but much of it is hollow. Words, arguments, declarations, and promises flood the air, yet their impact is fleeting. Silent action, however, has a density to it. It carries weight because it emerges from discipline, consistency, and inner stillness. To cultivate silent action is to cultivate influence that does not need to be demanded because it is naturally felt. Silent action speaks louder because it bypasses the ear and goes straight to perception. It is undeniable. It is the echo of persistence, the resonance of truth, the quiet force that endures long after words have faded. It is the expression of strength that does not need to announce itself, because in its presence, there is nothing left to say. There are forces that move quietly beneath the surface of life. They are not always recognized, not always named, and rarely are they directly measured. Yet, they shape the direction of choices, the weight of emotions, and the subtle shifts of perception. This is the unseen influence. It exists in every interaction, in every environment, and in the invisible dialogue between mind and world. To acknowledge it requires sensitivity. To harness it requires awareness. To live in harmony with it requires discipline. When you walk into a room and feel a sudden heaviness, though no word has been spoken, you have experienced unseen influence. When someone enters your space carrying calmness and your own breath unconsciously slows, that too is unseen influence. These are not coincidences. They are manifestations of energy fields that ripple from the internal state of one being into the shared atmosphere of many. They are subtle but powerful, elusive yet undeniable. The unseen influence begins within the inner world. Thoughts are not confined to the mind alone. They generate vibrations that expand outward. A single unresolved emotion can cast a shadow on interactions long before words reveal it. Frustration carried silently will eventually be felt by others even if never spoken. Equally, peace cultivated within radiates through presence without needing affirmation. This is why inner work is not a private act, it becomes a responsibility to the collective, shaping the field that others unknowingly step into. In traditions of discipline, there is emphasis on the mastery of energy. Not because energy is mystical, but because it is practical. The unseen influence is the result of this energy flow, guided or unguided. A wandering mind produces scattered influence, a focused mind produces concentrated influence. Just as a candle can barely light a large hall, but a laser beam of the same light can cut through steel, so too does focus turn unseen influence from background noise into directed impact. When influence is unconscious, it often becomes destructive. A mind lost in negativity generates turbulence that spreads like ripples through every interaction. Without noticing, the environment grows heavier, conflicts arise more easily, trust weakens. The person may never intend harm, yet the unseen influence carries the weight of their internal storm outward. Awareness, then, is the first step in transforming influence from accident to instrument. To cultivate unseen influence requires more than outward discipline. It demands refinement of the unseen self, the thoughts entertained, the emotions nurtured, the silence honored. A calm mind projects steadiness without demanding attention. A disciplined body carries dignity that commands respect without effort. A heart unburdened by resentment emits warmth that others sense without explanation. People may not consciously recognize why they feel different around such a person, but they will feel it nonetheless. The unseen influence also operates in environments. The architecture of a place, the organization of space, the sounds that linger, the unspoken culture, all these shape behavior and thought. Walking into a temple or a library naturally quiets the mind, stepping into chaos naturally accelerates restlessness. The unseen is woven into design, into habit, into repetition. It is not accidental but crafted intentionally or unintentionally by those who came before. To live consciously is to become aware of the invisible structures that shape our behavior, and to recognize that we too are always contributing to the environment others will inherit. The unseen influence extends beyond human presence. Nature itself communicates silently yet persuasively. The rhythm of waves, the stillness of mountains, the persistence of wind, these are not passive backdrops but active forces shaping the inner state. Spending time in silence among trees or by water restores balance, because the unseen influence of nature recalibrates the scattered energies of the human mind. Just as pollution affects air, so too does turbulence affect the mind. Nature cleanses both. To engage with the unseen influence is to recognize that power does not always announce itself. Power is often quiet, subtle, and steady. It does not need to speak loudly, its presence is already felt. A person who has cultivated stillness carries more weight in silence than others do in noise. Their unseen influence penetrates without force, shifts perception without argument, and anchors chaos without resistance. This is not manipulation but resonance. Every interaction leaves an imprint, a subtle after effect. When you speak in anger, the echo lingers longer than the words. When you offer kindness, the warmth continues even after departure. These imprints accumulate and create invisible layers of experience that shape future interactions. Over time, this collection of unseen influences builds into reputation, into trust, into either harmony or fragmentation. Life is not only what is said or done, it is also what is felt and left behind without being named. The unseen influence is present in leadership. Authority may be granted by position, but true influence arises from presence. A leader whose inner state is unsettled spreads unease. A leader grounded in clarity spreads direction without demanding obedience. This is why the greatest leaders often lead by example without needing to assert dominance. Their unseen influence naturally aligns others. It is also present in teaching. Words convey information, but presence conveys transformation. A teacher who embodies discipline influences more deeply than one who merely speaks about it. The unseen influence of their being becomes the real lesson, one that cannot be forgotten because it is felt more than heard. Relationships too are guided by unseen influence. Love is not sustained only by words or gestures, but by the consistent invisible field of attention, care, and presence. The absence of this influence is felt as strongly as the absence of spoken connection. It is in the small silences, the tone of attention, the unspoken patience, that unseen influence shapes the quality of bond more than grand declarations ever could. The unseen influence is not separate from life. It is life woven in subtler threads. To dismiss it is to ignore the most powerful currents that steer thought, action, and destiny. To cultivate it is to walk with awareness, responsibility, and strength, knowing that every inner movement radiates outward, creating ripples that continue beyond immediate sight.